Hello, 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 and welcome to this week's edition of Anchor Watch. I am Bobby Jones, your humble host, and currently on travel, but there's just so much to talk about that I feel like I have to get into it. Want to bring my partner in crime here, the man, the myth, the legend behind the scenes, Sam, to come on because Sam, we got a lot we got to break down here. I'm
Yeah,
trying to wrap my
I'll
mind
follow
around
your
it.
lead, man, because it is so much.
And a lot of it I take very personal because of what happened this past week. But let's start with um, the periodical of record is how I look at Time magazine historically, and Time has a cover that is pretty interesting. Can we just show this cover real quick? This is not just how Time sees it, but if you ask anybody outside the United States of America, this is the vision that they have of the current commander in chief. I don't need anybody to say that that is the case. I don't need anybody to try to lecture me and say that's not the case. I spent over half my life at sea in the Navy, going around the world. I have friends all over the world, and they have gone out of their way to make it known to me that they can't believe what they're seeing out of us. They don't understand the lack of logic. They don't understand the lack of adherence to the law that we historically have said other nations of the world should follow. This week has been something else as far as the blatant disregard for the law and norms. And so, Sam, before we really dive into it, what is your impression of that cover?
I mean, it's exactly right. I mean, and we're getting ready 10, 11 days from now to do the, next No Kings March, and that's what it's all about.
Yep.
That's what it's all
The
about.
fact that the fact that we've had to have multiple ones of these things um, is kind of, well, it's not kind of, it's very concerning. But make no mistake, there are certain messages that are purposely being put out. And when I say purposely, I'm not talking about, well, it can be interpreted this way. No, no, no. We're going to go into here in a little bit. This is exactly what those in power want to happen. So that being said, let's get into this. In case you've been living under a rock, the National Guard has been deployed in various locations around the United States. They are conducting law enforcement activities that are supposed to be legally supposed to be done by local law enforcement. Now, what's interesting about this, even when the National Guard could be deployed to deal with civilian disturbances, a declaration of emergency has to happen. That happens because it triggers certain legalities that fall in place. And guess what? Congress gets involved. Sam, have you heard of any declarations or of emergencies made here since Donald Trump has come back into office?
Not official. I've heard a lot of
Okay,
him running his mouth about it, though.
right, right. But no legal paperwork, no motions, no executive orders outside of DC, which he doesn't have to ask Congress for permission to. Nothing, right? So, Sam, can you bring up the cover of this article from the Guardian? I, Ladies and gentlemen, the 82nd Airborne, America's quick strike reaction force, militarily, is being sent to Portland. Now, let me say something about this. I'm old enough to remember when a certain Secretary of Defense got in big trouble because he was texting things on Signal Chat, on the app Signal Chat, the same one that you may use or your teenagers may use or your friends may use. Well, here we go again. Anthony Salisbury, who works for the Department of Defense, was caught in a restaurant texting about the 82nd Airborne and its deployment to Portland. Now, why do you, well, first of all, the ridiculousness of this happening all over again, right? Yes, I'm ticked off about it. I'm not surprised by it because we have a bunch of unprofessional, unserious people right now running the world's most lethal military force. Just keep that in mind. And I'm going to get back into them in a little bit. But the fact that this man is in a restaurant sending this out, everybody can see it. People can see it to the point where the Minnesota Star Tribune, the newspaper, has the images of the conversations. So apparently he didn't have a privacy screen on. Apparently it was more larger type. But he's like, hey, we're sending 82nd, and Hegseth wants to get top cover from the president because Hegseth wants to send the message of we're bringing our most lethal people into Portland, the 82nd Airborne. Him being an Army guy, he understands what that is, and he wants to make sure that President Trump provides top cover. But in the text messages, they specifically talk about how they're sending the 82nd to basically send the strongest message possible against American citizens, not foreign adversaries, not potential enemies of the United States, into Portland, where I'm sorry, I've not seen any riots, I haven't seen anything, but into Portland to deal with run of the mill criminal activity that happens at every city in every town in America. So, Sam, let's stop there. Let's just stop there. If you lived in Portland and you knew the 82nd Airborne was coming to your neighborhood, what would be your thoughts?
I mean, I have a lot. I have questions for you. that
Yes.
that because my like non-military brain kind of can't handle it. But I think, let's say I lived in Kiev before the Russians attacked, and they were broadcasting that they were going to attack. I would think almost the same thing, except that the 82nd Airborne, as far as I know, is dramatically better than the Russian military, right? So
Very
I'm
much
in
so.
Kiev, and I'm like, why are you invading me? There's no reason to do this. It's not like here's what I'm trying to say. The United States couldn't do this to another country because it would
No,
be preemptive or aggressive, right? Or offensive. We
it'd
can't
be a
do
declaration of war. It'd be an
exactly.
unadulterated declaration of war.
So how is anyone's mind not exploding about this? That it is actually we're doing a thing to a city in the United States that we couldn't do to a country.
So let's back up. And again, the beautiful thing about it is this current administration will telegraph everything to test the waters before they do it. Do you not
Right.
recall here in the last 2.5 weeks, the president of the United States tweeted out that he is declaring war on American cities? He
Yes.
said that. I did not. So those on the right, you can get mad with me if you want to. I am literally stating historical documented fact. Okay. The 82nd Airborne. For those who don't understand what the 82nd Airborne's main capability is,
Well, that's what I was going to
these
ask. Yeah.
these are the guys that flew over Normandy and landed behind enemy lines at the beginning of D-Day. Their job is to literally drop into the fiercest environments, fight and win. Period. Jumping out of as I used to say when I was in the Navy, I don't know why anybody would jump out of perfectly good functional airplanes, but that's what they do, right?
Right.
That is what they do. And so now they are taking guys that train in that. And by the way, again, receipts. This is the same organization, the same unit that President Trump spoke to at Fort Bragg,
Hmm.
where they had all those guys up there and he turned it into a political rally. See, understand something, ladies and gentlemen. None of this is just happening happenstance and random. This is all carefully planned out. He speaks to the 82nd Airborne or the 101st, one of the airborne groups, one or two, 82nd or 101st, maybe 101st, 101. Anyway, it's an airborne group not designed
Right.
to deploy. And he sits there and he tries to turn them from political props into political pushers. He takes the youngest members of that group, put them behind him, look overly monochrome, but that's neither here nor there. Excited that the president's there, and they cheer what the president says. Now he gives the visual that there's a buy-in from the military. He tried to do the same thing with the generals and admirals. No dice. Why? Because they have 30 and 40 years of experience and they knew the game that was being played and they were not going to play it, even if they agreed with them. Okay. But the 18-year-old, motivated, physically beast, airborne ranger type is like, hey, Commander in Chief is talking to me. So they plant the seed. Now they're starting to harvest the seed by actually deploying them after using them as a political prop. This is the slow churn that is happening to politicize the military to the point where, when they are desensitized because of the slow mission creep of this, and mission creep is something starts and then it becomes much bigger, the slow march towards this to where when they receive unlawful orders, they will be inclined to execute it, shows me how calculated this is. So
Yeah.
he goes
Right.
from let's back up one more time. One more time. We started with National Guard units, which are reservists that were in their home states. Now we've ramped up to National Guard units that have been put on active duty and deploying out of state, like Texas, going to
Texas here.
Illinois. Right here. This happened this week too. So again, what you're seeing, we're watching the frog in the pot scenario, slowly turning up the boil from, okay, it's just National Guard. I'm going to activate the home states. Now I'm pulling National Guard from red states and deploying them to blue states and blue cities. I'm creating political divisions by who I choose to deploy. And now I've done that with the National Guard. Now we're going to the next step. Now we're going to active duty units. Now we're going to the fiercest active duty units because I must have the visual and the message sent, regardless of what's going on. It's about kowtow and heal. So I'm going to let that just sit for a second, Sam. This is how I see it. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it is important to note that as of right now, the 82nd hasn't been called up,
Right?
but they're still trying to figure that figure out how to do it, and
But that's what they're
they're giving
pushing
away
for.
the game. That's exactly it. And I never thought of it that way, Bobby. You're I think you're exactly right that at a certain point you've you've made just minute um you've inched forward in your
Yep.
morality, right? You've just made the slightest compromises, but they add up over time.
Right.
And so when you get the one, the final compromise that you're going to have to make, it's a million miles from where you started, but only
Right.
a couple of inches from where you last were. That's a dangerous spot.
Right. And let's take again, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to do is to break down everything in its totality. See, what the current administration wants you to do is look at the shiny object of the moment. Boom, boom, flash
Yeah.
bomb, flash bomb, flash bomb. I'm sorry, I'm blind to that because here's the deal. From day one, when the first thing he did before Hexeth even got there, they started to clear out the military lawyers, the head of the JAG Corps of the big
Yep.
three services, remove them, put Hexeth in. He brings his personal lawyer in. They now vet who those JAGs are going to be. The first thing they went after was the legal restraints, or I'm sorry, the legal constraints, meaning we're purposely holding ourselves back from doing stuff. They remove that. Then they start moving into their agenda of, okay, let's go after the heavy
Hmm.
populated, overwhelmingly blue, mixed as far as ethnicity and social standing areas of the country. Which ones do we hate most? We'll start with California. This is in line with the other line of operation, which is the deportation activities that have come from Miller. See, in the military, we have these things called lines of operations. So you got one that goes across here, and they run in parallel. So you have one with the legal, when it deals with the military. Then you have one with ICE and how they're doing business. And then you
Mm-hmm.
have another with the actual military, both domestic and abroad. And then that legal one that overlaps with the military is now overlapping with domestics. Now they want military JAGs to start prosecuting civilian cases. Ladies and gentlemen, this is
Wow.
not happenstance. You're watching the slow degradation of the American norms and the systems that we have. No president in American history, to include Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War, thought that, hey, military lawyers should prosecute civilian crimes. Nobody. This is a first, and it's not being reported on much at all. So you occupy DC, and now you subject civilians to military law, military tribunals, military um, lawyers. Are you serious? So they're going to do the same in California. They'll do the same in Chicago. They're doing these things, ladies and gentlemen, in plain sight. And because number one, the average American does not understand American civics. And we've talked about this, and I'm bringing that back if I can ever catch my breath from what's happening. And the average American does not think it affects them and therefore should not matter. You're going to look up one day, you're going to have a military service member standing at your favorite coffee spot, and you're going to see them run down some civilian, and they're going to be hauled off and put in front of a freaking military lawyer. And none of them swore an oath or took office.
Right.
So this is what's happening, people. It is absolutely insane. So if the 82nd Airborne does not deploy, it's going to be for two damn reasons. Number one, a judge, a federal judge at the federal level will say you can't do that, and the Trump administration listens, or the story of them trying to do this to send a message and how clumsy it looks with Signalgate 2.0 embarrasses them to the fact where they back down. And what's amazing to me is that story broke on Saturday, and I'm asking you guys in the chat, how many of y'all heard that story? Because Lord knows I didn't until Sam brought it to my attention.
Right.
That is the issue. That is the issue. And so I'm not one to sit there and jump around like, oh my God, the sky is falling. But ladies and gentlemen, you're slowly watching it. I just laid out for you a timeline over the last 9 months of how they're changing the norm and desensitizing you to military being law enforcement with no direct check, no local law enforcement, this, that, and the other. And we are now starting to see, even with the ICE operations in Portland and stuff like that, where the local police are telling ICE, you will not drive through this neighborhood like you're crazy. You're not going to drive into a crowd of protesters or we will arrest you. That happened this weekend too.
Yep.
So now you're seeing local authority who are going to try to put down what they believe lawless activity because the federal government is not checking itself. So let me just pause there before I move to this next story.
Well, I have a couple of questions from the audience
Yeah, go
and
ahead.
from me too. But continue because I want to hear the end of your thought here.
Yeah, I'm pausing here because this has all happened within 9 months. We're not even close to a year.
Yeah.
Okay. We are in what the third quarter, the beginning of the third quarter of this. If something doesn't change, and by something, I mean two major factors. If Congress does not start asserting its authority, and if the American people do not make their voices heard, just think about where we'll be this time next year before the midterm elections, if we even have them. That's the rest of my thought there.
It is impossible to imagine, and there's a couple of things. And our friend Patrick, who is always makes incredible statements, Patrick, and always asks the questions that I'm looking for. I'm going to get to you. Have two that I want to ask Bobby.
Yep.
But first, I just want to say that when you said that local law enforcement, and by the way, like anytime I'm looking off, I'm not.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm looking at I'm looking at chat. I wish I could just put it in my glasses and my mesh in my brain. But anyway, that would be terrifying. Chat mesh in your brain. But in any case, you said, local law enforcement were pushing up against ICE and federal enforcement. And you realize that's just as close to state aggression as we can get, because ultimately the government has a monopoly on violence, theoretically, right? Like the government has coercive power through law enforcement, through law and enforcement. And that's what Trump is throwing around. He's mad with this sort of coercive, violent power. with
Hmm.
the one who's in the 82nd Airborne is a key example of that. He's like, laws don't matter anymore, only violence. And
Right.
a state or a local law enforcement community is saying no. And so what we have are two forces, right? Both with
Yeah.
a monopoly on violence, butting up against each other. And what does that sound like? That's terrifying,
So it's terrifying. You have the
right?
classic state.
That's war. That's what that is.
Right, right. You have the classic state versus federal thing. Ironically, the same thing that the South said before the Civil War during Jim Crow in the South, saying states' rights and states' rights and states'
States' rights.
rights. Trust me, I
Yeah.
grew up here. I knew, but and I just find it fascinating because here we are, and we're starting to see a role reversal. Because here's the
Yeah.
thing, that clip that I saw, I'm pretty sure it was Portland, where you saw the ICE official wanted to drive through protests because they were protesting ICE. They were legally protesting. And
Yeah.
then there was another clip where I want to say it was DC, where they were trying to deport a young man, and the DC citizens were so mad and yelled so much and made so much hell that they let the man go.
They left.
Right.
Yeah.
What you're seeing is local law enforcement are exactly that. They're local, meaning they know the people there. They grew up there. That is their home. The people that are coming in like an invasion force, that they're not from there. They're ordered there. They don't want to be there. See, there's similarities between what Russia has done to Ukraine and what Trump is doing to his own American citizens. Unwanted, not needed, not wanted there. Um, but most importantly, the local people are putting up the biggest resistance. Now, the question that everybody needs to ask themselves is, what happens when that first miscalculation happens, where someone's actions from the National Guard or, God forbid, active duty military causes harm, hurt, or even death to somebody? You
It,
know, I can
I
tell you
mean,
what's going to happen. They're going to smear the person that was killed,
oh, for
like they
sure.
always do. But
Shot heard around the world, right?
right,
So I want to ask a couple of questions from Patrick. And
yep,
Patrick, you got them coming. Like I have three now from Patrick. Um, and Chi Chi Mom, I'm going to ask your question later. But Patrick says the first thing is, let me ask both so that you can kind of
yep,
tee off on both these. But the first is if, and I didn't copy it, so I have to think of it from
that's fine.
memory. But what orders would the 82nd even get in Portland? Right? What would they even be doing in a very peaceful, hippie granola city? And number
Hmm.
two, if Steve Miller and Trump have been talking about the Insurrection Act, and they've been using the word insurrection, insurrection, insurrection,
Hmm.
uh, as clearly they're wanting to enact or play the Insurrection Act.
Hmm.
What happens that is different than what's happening right now if they invoke the Insurrection Act?
So a couple of things. Let's start with, what could the 82nd do? What they will probably do is draw up orders where the 82nd will be ordered in a support role
Right?
to federal officials there to help them secure property and to enable the mission of, say, ICE. That's what they'll say, and they would be the ones that are escorting ICE around, so they won't have to deal with protests. They won't have to deal with people tipping off the fact that ICE is in the neighborhood, stuff like that, and somehow magically help lower crime rates by their presence, because they're not going to sit there and say in the order that you are to combat crime, because that's where they have crossed the legal threshold and they know it. They're sitting there saying, we are going to support lawfully ordered federal activity by the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs, period. Now, interesting enough, we'll see what they deploy with, what type of weapons, if any. And again, Still waiting on the rules of engagement. But what's interesting, Hegseth at his speech in Quantico, with all the changes that I went off on, if you haven't seen that video, said that rules of engagement are stupid. Said that in the speech. Now, mind you, as much as he was walking around, those were off of teleprompters. They specifically, once again, I'm going to keep telling y'all this, they plant the seed so they can harvest it later. He planted the seed about rules of engagement, and he was talking about two major things: Venezuela, which we'll get to in a second, and the deployment of U.S. troops on American soil. Those are the things that he was getting after by sitting there talking about rules, because he knows every military officer worked there. So I was like, what the hell are the rules of engagement when you deploy to this, to do that? Because let me tell you something, as someone who did security, I can't wait to see them. Can't wait to dissect them. Now, granted, they'll be like, well, that's classified, blah, blah. Sure, fantastic. Let me ask the unit commander, have you seen the rules of engagement? How many pages are there? How thick are they? Who signed off on it? By whose authority? And most importantly, are they within not only the United States Constitution's parameters or the Geneva Convention's parameters? Just curious, just asking. You can't bullshit someone who actually had to do the mission. You know
Well,
what I'm saying?
look,
So I was just like, this is ridiculous.
don't you think? I mean, I feel like even the National Guard folks who, like, let's look at the Texas picture again. This is the Texas National Guard, and these are the out of shape dudes that Hegseth was railing against. But
But
even
he's sending
these
them.
guys get to Washington, D.C., and clearly just mill about. They look like they're bored as hell and
Now,
just
now,
wasting
now,
their
now, hold
time.
on. Look, in their defense, the National
Mm,
Guard dudes that look a little chunky in that picture, they're not full time active duty, so
right.
they have
Of
regular
course.
lives and got to do stuff. And then all of a sudden, throw their uniform on. So I'll give
Sure.
them the slight pass.
Of course.
However,
Of course. And
how
also, like, the National Guard is key. I mean, they're an important part of our armed services, and nobody should denigrate them. Hegseth did, obviously, and all that. What I'm saying is, even the National Guard were like, "What are we doing here? What is the
right?
82nd Airborne going to think?"
So once again, I love bringing back receipts. The National Guard was not activated in Texas when the floods came through and killed over 100 people, 100 young
Oh my
young
god!
people, young girls at their camp. National Guard not activated. Chrissy Nome nowhere to be seen, but she's in these streets cosplaying like freaking Ice Barbie, trying to deport people with her extensions and her Botox. So understand the priority here. The same people that you said are out of shape, you didn't want to activate to protect themselves and their loved ones in Texas, but you're willing to deploy them to a blue state or a blue city just to show that you are tough. Someone please in the chat make this make sense to me. I'm not these extreme left dudes that's running around like, I don't know. No, no. I'm giving you facts. Fact. We had national emergencies in the Midwest to include St. Louis and tornadoes, to include the floodings in Texas, and the National Guard was not activated. Okay. We have nothing going on out of the ordinary in Illinois, nothing going out of the ordinary in Oregon, and nothing going out of the ordinary in California. But yet we are now deploying the National freaking Guard, not the ones germane to the state, but from red states. Get offered up by Greg Abbott to go. But he didn't offer them up to protect his own damn citizens, and those poor young women died at that camp.
You
Make
know
it
what?
make sense to me, people.
Now they get another. What happens? They get another natural disaster, and those National Guard are unable to be called because they're strolling through the park doing hacky sack in fucking Portland. Like, it's
Exactly.
crazy.
Exactly. And I see in the chat, it was a Chris that said, hey, they're preparing for the Insurrection Act. You're right. So let's go to the second part of this.
Yes,
The Insurrection Act, you've got to understand when this happened in American history. Okay. This is sort of like when people talk about the Second Amendment, they don't understand the parameters of why that was a thing. But the
sure.
Insurrection Act happened after the Whiskey Rebellion. Okay, where George Washington himself, as president, and it's the only time in American history that the president, as commander in chief, rode into battle as commander in chief to suppress something, and that was the rebellions that were going on over whiskey taxes and everything else. Okay, that along with the successor to Washington, um, John Adams, who personally I rank as a top 5 president.
Hmm.
I have my reasons, particularly the Navy, but Adams was a very, very, very politically, how do I put this, sensitive man. And he
Hmm.
started with this whole train with the Seditions Act, where basically it's one of the worst things of legislation. It curtailed free speech. He's like, if someone says something bad about me, we can put you in jail, etc.
Got it.
That led down the path of Jefferson and everybody dealing with this Insurrection Act, where you got to understand we were rolling towards the War of 1812, slowly but surely. You still had loyalists to the British over here, and they were like, "Hey, we need to have now a standing army that is able to stomp out any type of insurrection." So the whole term insurrection was loosely based on threats that they had as the nation was new. However, look how far back Stephen Miller, and I'm using him as a prime example, dug back to justify this tactic. Over 200 years, they had to dig back to find something that, hey, how can we curtail local law enforcement and just put people in places we want without getting permission from Congress? But in order for him to enact that act, right, Congress is going to have to agree to it. Everybody's going to have to agree to it. And the question is, will the Republicans push back on that? Probably not. Probably not. What changes everything is now you are basically declaring a permanent, all encompassing state of emergency due to domestic uprising.
Right.
That is what is happening here. That is what he wants. Now, to do that, though, that means you got to call up people. You got to put your military. It costs money to do all of this. And by the way, in case you hadn't heard, we're in a government shutdown. And to be
Yeah.
completely honest, if you do it correctly, you'd have to have a chain of command that is activated, which they could have easily, that is willing to deal with the ramifications of such actions. As you can see with the National Guard, they're not really serious because, again, this is not for real. It's for play. It's for
Right.
the posturing. Um, but it will give the president, from what legal scholars say, because guess what? We've never used it. Um, not in modern times. It will give him the power to do things we've never seen a president do domestically before. And when I stop and think about it, the various things like the Patriot Act that was passed up to 9/11, the reorganization, how does that play into a modern national defense infrastructure? I don't know. I really don't know. And here's the thing: they know that most people don't know. So
Right.
it could be a blank check if we're not careful.
I think about this. War is is an industrial undertaking,
Yes.
right? And right now our economy is being propped up by investment in AI. Like by some accounts, Krugman and other economists say that if it weren't for the 600 some $billion that are being invested in AI right now, we could probably be in a recession at the moment.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
which is to say, our economy is transitioning into something. But what if that transition is just into a police state? Because it's actually, 180 odd billion for ICE,
Yes.
for
More than the
domestic
Marine Corps
military.
this fiscal year. Hmm.
And so it's not pennies. We're spending a real percentage of our budget, our annual budget, on military that we're aiming inward. So, maybe that is a way to prop up our economy, is just to police everyone to fucking death.
Well, so you're hitting on something I thought about last week. But before I answer that, Jill B asked, does this scenario that I'm painting scare the hell out of me? It doesn't scare me, but I'm not going to lie to you and say that I don't think this is outside the realm of possibility. It doesn't scare me because I am still clinging to the belief that there is a bottom that even Republicans will not deal with or want to see in America. That at some point common sense is going to kick in. And here's the thing that's really getting to me, Jill, is I think all of this all of this. Yes, it's fundamentally changing how America is, but I think the prime driver of this is the Epstein case. I think a lot of this is done by design to distract from that. Because while we're sitting here talking about this, the president sat there and passively said he wouldn't be opposed to looking at a pardon to Ghislaine Maxwell. He'll have to look at it. That is different than what he said 3 months ago, which is still different than what he said 6 months ago. And you better believe it's different than what he said a year ago when he was trying to get elected. Again, I'm just walking y'all through the path of how things continue to change. The whole overview of this episode is me trying to bring y'all back to where we started and how we got here. And across the board, everything has slowly changed in incremental dosages. Maxwell is in a cushy prison, and the president of the United States is thinking about pardoning her. Why? Because if you didn't see what Pam Bondi went through today on Capitol Hill, holy hell.
Can I play just one clip from that?
Please,
It's
please.
about 15 seconds.
Let me ask you something else.
Oh,
There's
wait,
been
hold
public
on.
reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos.
Hold on, let me start that over. That was my bad.
Unbelievable. It's
Let me
unbelievable.
ask you something else. There's been public reporting that
This was a
Jeffrey
blunt.
Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to
I can't even listen to the whole thing. There was a
She
pause
basically,
there was
yeah.
a pause when he asked.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you could tell, she could have just said no. Never
Yes.
happened.
Yes. And she didn't. And the reason the pause happened, if we are being 100%, as we keep it at 100, as the kids say nowadays, is because she had to calculate a way to not answer that question so she did not perjure herself in front of Congress. The initial instinct was to protect the president because that's why she has the job. And then she's like, oh crap, if I lie right here in front of the entire world, I will go to jail. I will at minimum be disbarred. Period. So the logic train kicked in, and here we are. I only mention that because, look, he knows what's in the Epstein files because he lived it. But if you think that every time there's a major thing that happens with the Epstein file, something else major militarily is not put in sequence with that, you are not paying attention. You are not paying attention. When Trump made the speech in Norfolk, Virginia, where I spent almost half my Navy career, and we're going to get into that here in a second.
Yes.
When he made that speech, he knew Bondi was going in front of Congress this week. They knew that the Senate was going to get a chunk of her ass, and they know the House is going. Ooh, the House. The Senate's supposed to be the adults. The House is supposed to be the petulant children. And I'm telling you right now, if you thought what happened in the Senate, I'm sure Daily Show and all of them will talk about what happened here today with the Senate. Boy, you just hold on to your butts when they get in front of the House, and that group gets hold of it. It's going to be ugly. And here's the thing. She's going to get fired from all sides, to include Marjorie Taylor Greene, to include people who are on the right who have put their political lives on the line about the Epstein files, and it's going to happen. That's why we're seeing this. They are desperate for us to talk about something else. I know, send the Texas National Guard to Illinois. I know, make some ridiculous speech down in Norfolk, Virginia for the Navy's 250th birthday, where we can say something and it'll dominate the headlines while she's up in Congress this week. This is like watching a bad game of Game of Thrones, like a bad episode. It's what it is. And it's American politics, and it has serious ramifications. Again, it's not the deployment, people, that bothers me about what's happening. It is the potential of miscalculation once they get there.
Right.
Someone who was pissed off that saw one of their loved ones get hauled off in a freaking license plateless van and they're coming home and they're mad and they run into 3 or 4 National Guard members who don't want to be there. What are we doing? So, this it's a lot.
Bobby, to that end, and then I want to move on to the 250th birthday, if that's okay. But Dan Barkoff, who introduced
My
us to
podcast
you,
buddy.
will be forever grateful. He, at one point, I think he was on with Rick Wilson a long time ago, and he was talking about his training with firearms, and it was I'd never heard anything like it. It was like every year was like a month, and initially it was like 18 months of absolute like hardcore all day kind of training. Like it was wild. And for some weekend warrior to think that, he's going to put on an ice jacket and a mask and carry around, an AR and a side piece and somehow save the day. I don't know. You're right. There's just, you put these untrained people in really dangerous and scary and high octane situations. And it's everything we're seeing now.
It's a perfect storm that's been created when, think about it like this. The reason ICE's budget is so high is because they're offering 6-figure salaries plus 5-figure signing bonuses to join. They know that the job is unpopular. And here's the thing, just from historical context, they are purposely targeting Black and brown people to join ICE. Purposely targeting. The same mentality of when slavery was going around and they had different slaves be the snitches on people trying to run. It's no different. It's just the same thing 2.0. And if you think I'm making it up, y'all need to Google your history. That's exactly what happened, right? So here we are. These people are getting paid such an inordinate amount to break out a generational debt that realistically, systemic racism has allowed them to live in. But to do that, they got to betray their own people. And you have that mentality matched with the guys who join up because they didn't feel powerful. They got bullied in school, Stephen Miller, and all this other stuff. And now we're giving you the wherewithal to go wreak havoc. This is something that requires professional, well-trained people that equate to a scalpel, and we're bringing a blunt machete to this situation. I mean, look at this.
Yep. One of my associate producers sent this just now. Chicago federal ICE agents in unmarked car point weapons at woman who took this photo, part of a volunteer neighborhood patrol team.
Yep. She has every right to patrol her neighborhood. Those neighborhood patrols in Chicago especially been there before ICE and will be there after ICE. But here's the thing. Number one rule that you learn when you're dealing with weapons in the military, at least, is you do not point at something unless you intend to shoot it.
Exactly.
So either one, he intended to shoot her, or two, like I said, he's got little penis syndrome and needs to feel tough by pointing a weapon at an unarmed woman. That dude right there should be fired and disciplined on his way out.
Like pretty severely disciplined. I mean, that's
like charges.
Yes.
Now, they'll say he's doing things in the line of duty, blah, blah, blah. Again, I'm going to take you back to the speech that was given at Quantico by Hegseth. If you make a mistake, we don't care. The New York Times this weekend came out with an article that talked about how in the Department of War, there's no accountability for war crimes anymore. It's a whole 10-part summary of Hegseth's belief on how we are supposed to, quote, discipline military members. Here's the spoiler. He doesn't believe so. As long as you're doing it in behalf of the United States, doesn't matter. So my question for him is very simple. My question for Bondi is very simple. My question for Patel is very simple. And my question for freaking Ice Barbie Kristi Noem is very simple. If you do it to Americans on American soil, does it matter? Doesn't matter. Because if not, here's what you're going to run into. This ain't the 50s. where you could go and try, and black people would be nonviolent and Latinos would try to blend in. This ain't the 50s. You're gonna be met with some real energy for some of these people. If you go look at social media, they're chirping. Now, do I think that's stupid? Absolutely. Absolutely. But this is what happens when you ratchet up tensions when you don't have to. When you have a president, a secretary of war, a secretary of freaking Homeland Security, FBI director, and an attorney general, and a freaking deputy chief of staff in Miller. Those six all have one thing in common. They know they have no business in the positions that they're in, and they're overwhelmed. So what do? They project strength because it's too hard to think and it's too hard to plan. And most importantly, it is too hard to govern. So this is what they want to do. The reaction of the American people has covered a spectrum. You have those that will come out for no kings, and it'll be millions. It'll make the first one look like chump change. But
Yeah.
here's the difference. They're going to be doing that in environments where they know they're being watched. They know that if it's so big, the National Guard could come there. They know we're at an ideological tipping point. And the thing is, the one group that I've not seen or heard anything from, the United States Congress. That's where we are. That's where we are.
That's where we are.
So let me talk about this Norfolk thing. So for those who don't know, this upcoming week, here, actually 6 days, the United States Navy will turn 250 years old. In my humble opinion, the greatest military branch the United States has ever come up with. And all you Army guys and Air Force guys, y'all can come at me. I don't care. It's our week. You got to deal with it. In November, it'll be the Marines. But as someone who spent well over half his life in said organization, I've been thinking about what summarizes my Navy experience and what I think of the Navy. And it's what John F. Kennedy said in that quote down there at the bottom of the screen. I can imagine no more rewarding a career. And any man who may be asked in this century what he did to make his life worthwhile, I think can respond with a good deal of pride and satisfaction. I served in the United States Navy. Now, Kennedy obviously was a Navy man, but when I think about what that organization has done since Congress, October 13th, 1775, said, hey, go grab some boats. We're going to give you a certificate and go do something against the world's most powerful Navy. Have fun. From that to finding its footing, against pirates in the beginning of the 19th century, and then, modernizing itself because of the war to make sure all Americans are free in the Civil War, to literally fighting the greatest conflict in the history of mankind and winning, even though it got sucker punched to start, to putting the first man, American man, into space and having half of the guys that walked on the moon be naval aviators and stuff. The Navy has gone to the highest point mankind has ever gone into outer space, and to the deepest point mankind has ever gone undersea. It's unbelievable what what the organization has done. And for me to even been such a little part of it is the coolest thing I've probably ever done in my entire life. That being said, watching Hegseth and Trump go to Naval Station Norfolk, the largest Navy base in the world, and get eager sailors, young sailors, even the officers that were standing behind them were young. They did that on purpose and used them as political props, propaganda pushers, talking about violating the law of the sea, international law, rules of engagement, everything that we don't do as the United States Navy. And to have them cheer for it pissed me off to no god dang end. Because what people don't understand about the Navy who've never been in it, the reason we are the best Navy the world's ever seen, quite honestly, Sam, is because we did things that no one has ever done, but had the class and the dignity to treat even our adversaries with the utmost respect. Our closest ally in Asia is Japan. I got buddies in the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force to this day. And mind you, they initiated Pearl Harbor. Okay. I've dealt with German sailors, naval officers, some of the best professionals I've ever seen. And here's the thing, you know who rebuilt the Japanese Navy and the German Navy? We did. We did. We became the best in the world because not only did we not only turn the other cheek and came back swinging, once we won, we helped people back up because we realized this is not about being a bully. It's about self-respect and respecting others. I look at people like Nimitz and wow, I go down the list, and Zumwalt and these guys that won the war and rebuilt the Navy and let people like me actually attain rank when my grandmother thought I can only be a cook when I joined, to be an Annapolis graduate
Wow.
when we didn't have a first graduate of the Naval Academy until after World War II.
Wow.
To watch women, classmates of mine, take command of ships and then have to be berated and told you don't belong there when they're the smartest, most capable people I know to do that, bothers me. And make no mistake, all the other branches are excellent. They're great and they have their storied history. But the one thing about the Navy is we are worldwide. We're worldwide. We don't hang in barracks when things ain't going off. We deploy 24/7. Somewhere right now, as you're watching this, someone's standing to watch in the middle of the night, making sure no one comes to your doorstep. And I can personally tell you, based on my experiences and things I got to do, there were actions that I took with my shipmates in the big picture that stopped you at your shopping malls from being bombed, you at your church from being bombed, for you to enjoy freedom. And the Navy is unlike any other thing where we don't wait for you to come to us, we go to you. We don't ask for permission to fly over countries. We have these things called aircraft carriers. Bitch, we bring it. We bring it. All the jokes about, oh, you guys at sea and all these guys. No country, make no mistake, no country wants to see a goddamn carrier strike group off of its coast. And you better believe they don't want to see an amphibious rated group with 1,200, 2,500 Marines in those ships. The Wu-Tang has come to your doorstep. And to understand, when you have that kind of power, you have to have leadership, like Theodore Roosevelt said, that speaks softly and carries a big stick. In my humble opinion, you don't win World War II without FDR first being Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He handpicked the guys, plucked them up, and made them admirals and said, go win the war, because he knew who they were when they were junior officers.
Wow.
Watch the same position Donald Trump say the stuff that he said while standing next to ships named after these guys, because they literally saved the free world. Blows my mind. Blows my mind. The fact that they don't feel the weight of the responsibility of any member of the armed forces, but to go to Norfolk, Virginia, where you have family after family that deals with deployments and not seeing their families and this, that, and the other, for them to be so god dang self-involved. Trump must have said the word I 50 times in that speech. It's not about you, man. And here's my thing. I don't hate Trump. I hate what he's doing, though. And I hate the fact that he is commander in chief in charge of 1.2 to 2 million Americans who made it a point not for it to be about themselves. If you cannot be as selfless minimum as they are, how can you possibly lead them? Right now, like I said, there's a ship somewhere doing God knows what while everybody's sleeping, standing to watch, been out there for months, weeks. The guys down off the coast of Venezuela down there, like, what are we doing? We're shooting people without any justification being provided. And I know some of the people on those ships, and I know it's got to be ripping them apart for us to use our national power like this. But ladies and gentlemen, the United States Navy has been the single, in my humble opinion, the single greatest force for good the United States of America has ever produced when you look at it holistically, for what it saved and what it had the guts to go do after it got knocked down, to literally going into the final frontier. And for Donald Trump to do and say the things that he said, for Pete Hegseth to go do and say the things that they said in the presence of a place where for over 112 years, something like that, deployed sailors all over the world and beyond, I was pissed. I was pissed. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, Bobby,
Uh,
we're all smarter and better people for knowing you, and also for having a Navy like this. You know, what do civilians like me say to veterans or anybody in the service? We say, thank you for your sacrifice. And what you're talking about is a sacrifice to all the servicemen and women, right? But what are they sacrificing to? Something so much bigger than themselves. And Trump doesn't see it that way. He
no.
says they're sacrificing to him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I see in the chat people are talking about Venezuela and unlawful orders versus lawful orders. You got to understand something. By the time an order gets down to the ships and the platforms that are shooting, they have to make the assumption that everything has been vetted. And I'm sure if the captains of those ships and those aircraft ask the question, they're going to be told this is a legal order because they're being told by the JAGs that are now in place.
Right.
Now, if any other country did this to the United States of America, we just shot, let's say they were drug runners, but we just shot them off the coast of Miami. Let's say it's 20 nautical miles outside of into international waters, outside of 12 nautical miles. And we just shot, like, say, 20 American cartel members. How do you think the administration would react to that? I mean, what do you think? I know what they would do, but here's what they're expecting the rest of the world to do. Here's the thing. They're drug runners, opium, and all that kind of stuff over in the Black Sea where Russia is. I don't see us shooting them.
Nope.
I mean, I can do this all day. There are certain people, they're not doing it to Mexico, even though they have threatened to do it. I wonder why. This is about looking tough.
Right.
There is no foreign policy. There is no shaping the world. The shaping of the world, Trump believes the world owes America something and he's here to collect. However, you have farmers who are going bankrupt because of these policies as we speak. You have farmers going bankrupt. You have the people that they rely on to pick their produce ghosting them. You have Nebraska and other Midwestern states going bankrupt. You have the world looking at us like we've lost our damn minds. You have former allies saying, why are you shooting at us? You literally, and I mean literally, have a military just like what happened here in the period of 7-8 months. You've got generals resigning because of it. Don't know if y'all saw those news reports. They're leaving.
We'll talk about that next week.
We got to, okay? Based on what Hegseth has done. Exactly. Farmers are actually committing suicide because they're losing family farms that have been in their family for generations. Prescription drugs going through the roof as of this week. And you have not noticed that after October 1st, you will.
You will.
You will. So again, America, what are we winning? How are we better off? To ask the question Ronald Reagan asked when he ran for president in 1984 and absolutely slaughtered Walter Mondale. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? It's a very simple question.
Yeah.
It's a very simple question. And a lot of Reagan's policies didn't work out long term, but in that snapshot of a moment, he won every state but Minnesota.
Yep.
Where Mondale was from. The biggest landslide. What blows my mind is if we had an election today, right here, right now, there's a good chance Trump could still win.
I mean, the only people more unpopular than Trump are Democrats.
Right, because they're failing an open book test.
Yeah. Yes.
Let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. If I ran the DNCC, give me 2 months to put everything I want in place. The midterms would be a walkover because this goes to not just policy, but selecting the right candidates. The
Yeah.
one thing Americans do hate, I don't care if you're right or left, they hate watching people be pushovers when they don't have to be. Right now, I feel for farmers like in Arkansas and Iowa and stuff like that. And those are historically red states. I really do. You can see the hurt and the pain every time they're interviewed. But in Arkansas, they voted over 31% more for Trump than Harris.
Yeah.
That's the power of misinformation. That's the power of identity politics. That's the power of racism and sexism.
That's it.
And we've done nothing. And the Democrats have done nothing to counter this. I don't know, Sam. We could be looking at this time next year going into the midterms, and the Republicans keep both the House and the Senate. And then what?
Then what? I mean,
Another 2 years in a second term with no check or balance.
and I've been interviewing a lot of Democrats who are primarying their, the incumbent Dems, and one of them earlier this week said that ultimately a primary is a challenge. It doesn't have to be dirty. It doesn't have to be nasty, but it is about bringing ideas and allowing them to the surface, and then getting some debate. Getting there, like the Dems have such a hold now on their cowardice. It is.
I agree.
And Patrick says, I don't agree with that at all. I think the Democrats have degraded Trump considerably, and I think,
So Patrick, I'm glad Patrick said that. No, I'm glad Patrick said that, because this is, and first of all, it's great to just have sane political discussions without people threatening to kill each other. But Patrick, here's why I disagree with you. I disagree with you because this is not a Trump thing. You're dealing with a MAGA movement. It's going to outlast Trump. I can tell you how we know this. They're already pivoting off of him. J.D. Vance is way more prominent as vice president than Mike Pence ever was. Okay. Here's other things. You're seeing people like Mike Johnson, John Thune become louder mouthpieces as they limit Trump to just making appearances where he cannot be challenged. Like, when is the last time President Trump has had a no kidding press conference? They're pivoting off of him. They know that either his health may decline, but at the end of the day, they know in 3 years the whole thing is up with him. They are now vetting successors. This is why you see Ted Cruz once again being visible again, saying, "I'm the guy." This and other. You're seeing these things pop up, but at the same time, you you still don't have a coherent message from the Democratic Party right now, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to ask y'all a simple question: What is the Democrats' central message right now? During the middle of a government shutdown, what is their central message? And yes, Hofferkamp, Vance is a sugar daddy. He is being, Peter Thiel is basically his sugar daddy, so he's getting played. But can anybody in the chat tell me what is the Democrats' message? This is what I mean by failing an open book test. Because if you just listen to Americans, the economy stinks. There's no stability moving forward. Job opportunities are drying out. Inflation is still there. And here's the thing: schools are getting defunded. Most kids don't think they can go to college. These are very simple things. These are kitchen table things that can easily be addressed. They're choosing not to.
I think, there's, I think it's one reason Mamdani is captured so much imagination, because we're all looking for that leader. Patrick also mentioned, it's hard to, if there's nobody running for president, it's hard to find that one mouthpiece that's going to speak for everyone. But I think ultimately, Schumer could do it. He, in the past, there are Democrats at the top who could lead. But nobody's really stepping into that role quite yet.
So this is Sam. I hate to interrupt you.
Well, go ahead.
I hate to interrupt, but I'm looking at the chat, and it's funny that I'm loving seeing the comments. I think I saw Susan sit there and say, "Why is it up to us to have the message?" Then someone else said,
Mm.
"Crickets. What are their message? What is the Republicans' message? Crickets." Okay, let me address both of those. When you're in power, you don't necessarily have to have a message.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You don't have to. It helps, but what was Trump's message in 2020? What was Trump's message in 2024? I'm not the Democrats. That was the message, because he promised everything under the sun. Everybody knew what happened. The other thing is this: when you are out of power, and because of our electoral college system and the gerrymandering of districts, even though you have more people that will vote for you popularly, right? Even though you have that, that does not ensure victory.
Mhm.
And if you notice, we have about eight swing states now, from Colorado to Arizona to Georgia to Ohio, Pennsylvania. We know who they are. Florida, we all know who they are. And here's the thing about those swing states: there's nothing unique about them except for the fact that the issues that you worry about are amplified much more in those states.
Hmm.
Much more in those states, because those states have the unique combination of being agricultural and service minded when it comes to the two. So, like, for example, Georgia's number one um, um, generator of income is agriculture, even though we have Atlanta,
Right. Wow.
and Hollywood South and all that. Because that's why these swing states are so unique. They combine the two. They amplify what's going on with the American citizen. So that's why they talk about the blue wall up in Michigan. It used to be there. It's not a blue wall anymore, right? Or when Georgia shocked everybody and went for Biden in 2020, right? These are the type of things, that we have to deal with. And yes, Thomas, the Electoral College was designed to suppress votes as a vestige of freaking slavery and the country coming together. The other piece of that is Washington, D.C. is located where it is because they wanted a Southern, back then that was considered the South, Southern capital, part of the drug deal. The Electoral College, the Three-Fifths Clause, and Washington, D.C.'s location and establishment in 1800 is what had to be given for the South to sign on to the Constitution, period. And Georgia was like the first Southern state to really do it. That's why we're the fourth state. But anyway, I digress. The main thing here is you've got to understand the Democrats have no counter message right now. The closest thing you're getting is AOC and Bernie. But because of who they are, the Democrats, just like Mondani, you said, Sam, don't want to back them. So my question for Schumer, for whoever's running the DNC now, I don't even know. I don't even care. What's your counter? What's your message? Why should someone who voted for Trump 3 times vote for a Democrat this time? It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's that simple. I see you, Patrick. You said anti-corruption. I agree, but you haven't heard them do it. You
Yeah.
haven't heard them do it. And I'm not trying to be negative Nancy, people, but we are dealing with reality here, and the stakes are pretty goddamn high. They're pretty
True.
high. So, is there
Yeah.
anything else in the chats there?
I mean, man, this chat was alive tonight. I'm so glad to see it. And Bobby, another hour has passed just like that.
Yeah, that's good.
What we hope doesn't happen in the next week, between now and next Tuesday night, is you look up in the sky and you see paratroopers floating down like in Red Dawn.
Yeah. It's so funny. I wouldn't be surprised if they were that dramatic. I mean, they're just gonna probably just fly out there and land.
Drop them in. Yeah.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter, they're even discussing this. I'm like, come on, man. Are you serious? Are you serious? Ladies and gentlemen, hey, keep paying attention. Talk to your people about things. And like I keep telling you, go to a local, county commissioner, city council meeting. Just go and just watch your process. Watch the process of your government at work.
Yes.
You may be surprised what you learn. That's all I'm asking.
Go meet your neighbors. Really, meet your neighbors. They are the closest in community to you.
Yep.
Yeah, and sign on to Lincoln Square. We are building this community, and I love it that we get to argue with our chat. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, that's great. But that's the beauty of what America is supposed to be:
That's
the
it.
discussion, the argument, and the debate of ideas. And right now, we're watching that get completely wiped out with this authoritarian move, and I can't stand it.
Yeah.
Can't stand it.
All
That's
right.
all I
All
got
right.
from over here, Sam.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Bobby. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate you putting up with me these nights.
No, it's fun, man. It's highlight of my week. Shoot.
Yeah, same. I
So,
love it. All right. Well, everyone, don't forget to follow Bobby Jones. Subscribe to Navshad on Substack. It's great. You're putting out so much content. You're also putting out for Midas Touch. Midas is doing incredible work. Obviously, all of these groups were, a rising tide, as they say, Bobby.
it's
Lift
all
all
votes.
ships, and that's what we're trying to do. So, guys, we'll post this on Substack later, maybe tomorrow morning. If you liked it, definitely share it out. We're building.
And happy birthday, Navy.
Happy
250
birthday,
years.
Navy.
You look
All
good,
right.
girl. All right.
Yeah. Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.